we're each unique and wondrous beings made in the image of the divine, and that we have a privilege as human beings to create a quality of expression in our life that is aligned with the universe. That's my definition of well-being.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick Rodell. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Reflections on Living Well podcast. Today, our guest is Gard Jameson. Gard spent 25 years professionally as a CPA and financial planner. He now teaches Asian philosophy at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He is the author of 5 books: The Beatitudes, The Peace Pilgrim Pictures, Phaethon, Monkey, and Ramayana, Our Mythic Moment. The last 3 books reflecting upon 3 grand epics from the West, China, and India. He has also written a screenplay called Voltaire Emilie, The Lives and Love of Voltaire and the Great Emilie du Chatelet, held by Einstein as one of the great physicists. Gard has founded or co-founded, as well as sits on the boards of quite a few institutions related to well-being, spirituality, justice, and compassion. Wow, Gard, I'm looking forward to this conversation. Quite a resume there, and that only just names a few of the things that you are involved in and things you've done in your past. I think you are the right person to be having this type of conversation with, if you know what I mean by right person. I'm just excited to glean into your mind today and gain some insights on what it means to live well, what it means to live a good life. Now, I know I just gave that introduction, but I also like to ask people to introduce themselves. How do you like to introduce yourself or say something about yourself?
You know, there's a great story in India called the Bhagavad Gita, and there's a great image of a chariot with the greatest warrior of all time, Arjuna, and the Lord Krishna. And I like to say that my life has been an amazing journey, but it was made most amazing when I discovered, however you name the Lord, that the Lord was in the chariot too, and that I have a connection to that reality, to that divine reality. And that reality creates an opportunity to bring meaning to life and to bring, as you say, a quality of well-being.
Nice. I like how you introduce yourself as a connection to what I call the divine, that spiritual reality that is an extension of ourselves. In the way I look at it, an extension of ourselves that's greater than our individual selves, but yet we are a part of it in some fashion. Yep. So I like to ask in the beginning, what is your view on what it means to live well? And then we'll unpack it for the rest of our conversation.
Well, as a professor of philosophy, I always tell my students, like geometry, there are 3 axioms. And when you understand the axioms, you can unpack a lot of the rest of the math associated with geometry or life. And for me, the 3 axioms are that I have a body, I have a mind that has the capacity to reflect on my experience and to discern a quality of wisdom, not always precise, but a quality of wisdom. And that I also am, as Alan Watts said, a spiritual being having a human experience. And that when I understand that priority, then I really am putting the first button into the first hole of the shirt. And when you do that, the buttons go down pretty well. So understanding that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, that to me is the sort of the priority order of the axioms. But then there's another axiom, which is that each of us is person. We are a person and has personality. My wife is an obstetrician, and when she delivers those little babies, she says, "You've just co-created with the universe a child without duplicate in infinity, irreplaceable in all eternity." And so to realize the significance of that axiom, that we're each unique and wondrous beings made in the image of the divine, and that we have a privilege as human beings to create a quality of expression in our life that is aligned with the universe. That's my definition of well-being.
I like that. So it's a connection to,
Yeah.
I'm going to use my words here. It's a connection with that divine, the divine beingness of it all. We
Yeah, but
are
to also
individual.
connect to the fact that we're a body and that we
Yes.
have a mind. And the mind is not just, as the Chinese say, what's above the neckline. The mind is also the heart, and it's
Mm-hmm.
also the body, and it's also the soul.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Connecting with it all.
Mhm.
Being
Yeah,
grounded in this physical body, which is an expression of the divine in as well. All of it is.
yeah,
I use the analogy where, like, I know they use this a lot in Vedanta philosophy, like the waves of the ocean. Each one
yeah,
of us are waves, yet we're all a part of that ocean of the divine. Can you
yeah.
unpack that a little bit more? What does that look like? What does it look like in our daily lives? What are those attributes of living well?
Well, I think it looks for me, and I can only speak from my experience, it looks for me like every day I need to attend to my body. And so I just went through a bout of prostate cancer, and so need to attend to that. Need to attend to the fact that I'm 70 years old and I'm not quite as sharp and fast as I used to be. Need to attend to the fact that every day there's a daily appointment, a daily invitation to connect to the divine. And as I tell my students, if the Dalai Lama were to knock on your door and say, "Hey, Broderick, you got 20 minutes for me?" I think the answer would be, "Of course." So now amplify that by a trillion times, and we're talking about God knocking on the door. However you call God, Allah, Brahman, Tao, knocking on your door and saying, "Hey, do you have a little time where just you and I can connect? You and I will commune." And when we make that time, as I do, once a day with my wife, twice a day for me, and occasionally a retreat, silent retreat, the whole context of every day is just enhanced. And I tell my students, you can tell that enhancement when you begin to see synchronicity, synergy, and serendipity emerging in the events of daily life. And it's really makes life pretty awesome when you see those three S's emerging in your life,
Hmm.
because that's an indicator for me of that you're living a well life, a life of well-being. Also, the quality of joy. That when there's a quality of joy, or what is called in India ananda, in our lives, that's, as Teilhard de Chardin said, the infallible sign of the divine.
Hmm. Yeah, that's just beautiful. Yeah, I love it. Right up
Mhm.
my alley, Guard. Right up my alley.
Well, you're
Um,
living in a
but
good alley.
let's unpack that a little bit more. Let's when we do have those synchronous moments, would you agree that I know there's different ways of saying this and there are different ways of interpreting this. How does the word flow sound to you? Does flow
Oh, I
fit
love
into
that
this?
word. Yeah, I love
Mm.
that word.
Yeah.
I just I teach world religions, and we were just talking about Taoism, and Lao Tzu has a wonderful word in Chinese called Wei Wu Wei, which is the action of non-action. And a lot of my students just sort of, "What is that? That's a contradiction." And I say, no, 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 that's the theory of flow. And the theory of flow is, as you may know, on two axes. The vertical axis, is the challenge, and the horizontal axis is the skill. So
Mhm.
if you said, "Hey, Gard, Michael Jackson wants to go out and shoot some ball with you today," I would go, "That's a hell of a challenge, Broderick." And I'm
Mhm.
going to tell you, my skill set ain't quite there. So the flow, which is the intermediate direction of those two axes, when you have enough skill to connect to the challenge, then you're in flow, and that creates a quality of joy. But again,
Mhm.
if I was asked to shoot ball with Michael Jackson or play a game, it's not Michael Jackson, excuse me, Michael Jordan, I would say, I would love
Mhm.
to watch him, but I dare not get onto that court. Don't have the skill set.
Mhm.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
flow
I
is
do. I
flow is
agree.
important.
Yeah, I think all those are connected. Flow, even synchronicity. We can fall into synchronicity, those synchronous moments, or notice them when we are more, um, I would say, close to flow, even if we're not in that flow. We want to. I'm glad you brought up Taoism because that's a major impact on my thinking. Has a major impact on my thinking. I read Lao Tzu regularly. I won't say every day. I used to pick it up every day, but I do still pick it up regularly. And those was 81. I think those 81 verses. I
Yeah,
can read them
81.
over and over and over and over again, and glean so much about flow and being in the zone, I suppose you can say, of
Well, and
life.
Lao has something else to say. He says that character, in philosophy, Heraclitus said, and I believe they're the three most important words in all of the language. Character is destiny. So good character is
Mm.
good destiny. Bad character, bad destiny. And we know this in the law of karma.
Mhm.
But what he says is character is not something that you learn on a book or you even learn by looking at other people. It's something that's infused. And so the requirement is to connect to that power, the Tao or Brahman or Atman, however you call it. And when you do, Thomas Aquinas called it infused theology. There's an infusion of goodness, of beauty, of truth, of love. And when these qualities are infused through that communion, that connection, meditation, mindfulness, then character begins to emerge in alignment with who you truly are. And that's, I
Mhm.
think, the great journey of life is to find who we truly are and what we're here to express.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Even in the as you may know, the Greek tradition, Aristotle, Plato before him, Socrates, the Stoics, a lot of it is about character development. The eudaimonia is about cultivating those ethical virtues, but having the character that takes practice, that takes a life of education and learning and using reason. I know in the Greek tradition they emphasize a lot on reason and thinking it
Yeah,
out, thinking about how you're relating to the world, and really thinking about how to develop that moral, ethical character, and how
yeah,
that's central to the good life.
absolutely
Yeah.
is. And you may know that in the ancient Greek tradition, the great playwrights, Sophocles, Aeschylus, they would write three plays. So you'd have Oedipus Rex first, and you'd have Oedipus at Colonus last. So Oedipus at Colonus is Oedipus as an old man. Oedipus Rex is as a young person who makes some really horrible decisions. So that's the tragedy, right? That occurs when we're young
Mm-hmm.
and we're not wise. But they required every free citizen to watch these because, as Aristotle says, there's a kind of therapeutic opportunity to see, okay, Oedipus Rex, that's really a horrible story. I'm not feeling so bad about my life anymore. I mean, this guy kills his father and marries his mother and pulls out his eyes. I'm not feeling so bad about my life. So that's kind of therapeutic. But then to see Oedipus at Colonus, where he's an old man, his eyes are out, but he's gained a quality of character and wisdom as a result of his experience. That's the arc of transformation. That's what moves us from tragedy to comedy. Comedy meaning hope, faith,
Mm.
love, not ha ha ha, all of these qualities. And so, again, if we can see our life in relation to an arc of transformation, we can be a little more self-compassionate and self-forgiving for stupid things we do as youth, which we all have done, right? I'll raise
Hmm.
my hand twice
Me too.
and, and recognize, hey, I've got an arc here, as Dr. King said. It may be long, but I'm going to write it, and we'll see where it goes.
Right? We can apply it to our
Yeah,
individual lives as well, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Sometimes we can get a little self-righteous and think that oh no, I've always been like this. I'm like, I
yeah, I think so.
don't know. Exactly.
Yeah,
So, Gard, we're going to come back to some of these themes, but I'm very much interested, and I think it's important to kind of unpack. Uh, where did this come from? How did you get interested in these various subject matters, philosophy? Where did this start? Where are you from, and any inspirations in your life?
yeah. I grew up on the ocean. I grew up with a surfboard in my hand, under my arm,
Hmm.
and so flow. All right, um, quiet meditation. It's always sort of been in my DNA. I'm very different than my siblings. But I, was reading Khalil Gibran as a young man and reading Plato and various people, Lao Tzu, and just really enjoying that stuff when my friends were saying, "Oh, it's time to party." So, well, and it really only took one experience, one of those dumb experiences, right? Where I woke up on a dirt road with my face in the dirt road, and I looked up and I could see a half filled bottle of Gallo wine, and my head was throbbing, and I knew I'd been really stupid the night before, and I sort of gave up on alcohol. My parents were alcoholics. I used to crawl up the outside of the house to get to my room because my parents would invariably yell at me as I was coming by for whatever reason. So there was a lot of difficulty, as we all have in our family of origin. But what I learned through the contemplative journey is that there's two things my teacher Thomas Keating suggests is that there's healing and there's transformation. And I've experienced, firsthand that healing of trauma, personal, collective, and genetic trauma. And I've experienced a quality of transformation, which has made in my older years, life an absolute joy. And so Lao Tzu, you may know, means in Chinese the old boy. And I consider myself to be an old boy. So there were moments, to your question, of real profound shifting. So one moment was 1972. A friend of mine was in Vietnam. He was walking down a dirt path with his battalion. 3 children with hand grenades approached the battalion. At the end of it, his whole battalion was dead. The children lay in their
Mm.
blood, and my friend had his leg blown off. And when I heard that story, Broderick, I went into my room and I shut off the
Mm.
lights and I said, I don't know if I can do this. If there's somebody here, I need to know, and I need to know now. And I had a download of unconditional love that has sort of been the milestone of my life because nobody can ever take that away from me. I know that there's a divine reality. I know that it's unconditional love, not conditional love, like a lot of theologies want to suggest. Not if you do this, if you become a Southern Baptist or a Lutheran, then I will love you. No, no. It's a constant download, as you know. And the question is, do we have our antenna up? So that was a major turning
Mhm.
point in my life. The next turning point was actually meeting my wife. I was coming up from the beach with my surfboard, and she was standing there with some friends. And she only told me this a few years ago, but she heard a voice from behind her that said, "This is the man you will marry." And she looked around thinking it was one of my friends pulling a joke, but it wasn't. And I didn't realize at that point, I was 15, she was 14, but I was a marked man. And it took another 10 years for me to wake up and realize you are the one. And we've been married for 42 years, and she's my bride. And we meditate every day, and we both live in a quality of meaningful action in the world. And that draws us together. And as we tell people, we don't go to bed at night, we pass out with a smile on our face.
That's awesome. Yeah, isn't that something how a lot of times we get moved towards these these universal truths or these concepts as a result of hard times, suffering,
Mm-hmm.
alcoholic parents,
Mm-hmm.
having to crawl up the side of your home to go to your room because you don't want to deal with the yelling, the tragedy of your friend getting his legs blown off, and with children with grenades. I understand that's hard to even listen to, and to lie there and open yourself up to God or the divine or whatever your way of looking at this thing, the universe for some people,
And that's
and
going on right now. It's
open
going on
yourself
in,
up to that and be like, yeah,
yeah, it's happening all
yep,
around us right
yeah,
now.
all these
I
things,
believe we're in a moment, a
yeah,
revolutionary moment, and it's a moment of resistance, and it's resistance to the cultures of fear that have been projected by politics,
mm-hmm,
commerce, and the media. And it's maintaining a steadfast understanding that we are born into unconditional love and our destiny is unconditional love. And when we understand that, then we can engage in what my friend Valerie Carr calls revolutionary love. And so I believe there are three
yeah,
principal values that govern the universe: revolutionary love, revolutionary compassion, and revolutionary hope. And they're all revolutionary
yeah,
because most people don't get it.
exactly. And I think that how do we use, because when I talk to folks and I reflect on my own experience, like you say, most of us have had some kind of tragedy in our lives. How do we use this tragedy to do what it did for you, to do what it did for a lot of us, to cause us to reflect, like what's happening in the world right now? How do I use this unnecessary violence and suffering, the pain that I feel, the hurt that I feel, that we feel? How do we use that as motivation to open our hearts, not close them? We tend to close them, but how do we open our hearts to something greater and listen, be a witness, be receptive to a voice that is beyond such horrific ways of thinking and behaving that we as human beings have a tendency to do? And I don't think we have to have tragedy in order for this to happen, but I think how can we use it as an invitation to open us up to say there has to be something. Is there something better in this world? And I think we can get that answer if we ask the question and open ourselves to it versus closing ourselves off and digging further and further into our silos. And all we talk about is the tragedy of the world, and we're not opening ourselves up to the potential of what is good. That's why I'm doing this podcast.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's
Yeah.
such a good reflection. And what you said is spot on. Rilke said the really interesting part of life is the question, not the answer. So,
Mm-hmm.
can we live with the question? And so, living with the tragedy that we see all around us on the planet, and then asking the question. And so, I say every day, I cry and then I giggle. I giggle, then
Yeah.
I cry. So, there's a quality of joy and a quality of being overwhelmed by what I see in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, do we have, again, as my teacher Thomas Keating says, do we have a heart open enough to receive what we're seeing and yet be resilient in what we're seeing and allow ourselves to take the information in and allow the question to be processed in in that way. So Adam Bucko talks about the path of heartbreak. Are we willing to open ourselves up to that heartbreak, or do we shut ourselves down and close our hearts and move to addictions or move to dysfunctional behavior and relationship? You know, it's the question. In India, the term, it's jnana yoga, it's self-inquiry, right? What's going
Yep.
on here, right? That was my question. And I got the answer. But if you don't ask the question sincerely, and if you don't follow through with a discipline, then you're just playing games.
Yep. Yeah. I think we can learn that from so many traditions. Socrates, reading Plato's, expression of Socrates, it can be quite annoying. You feel like, oh, Socrates is annoying. But it's what you're saying. He's asking these questions. I don't know the truth. And the beauty of that is that I'm open. I'm asking questions. What is the good?
Yeah.
What is it all about? I don't have the all of the answers. But I know that this suffering that I'm seeing around me, in myself, there has to be something greater. And I think
Yeah.
that some of us look at it that way. Some people, for various reasons, have a tendency to look at the world, was it, with the glass half empty, just have that tendency for growing up in an environment. That's what the narrative was in that environment, historical reasons. I get that. I've been there. Um, but how do we encourage that opening up and seeing and questioning? If even if we do see the glass half empty, can I ask, why do I see the glass half empty? The
Yeah.
solution is not look at the glass half full. No, no, no. Ask the question, why am I seeing it half empty? What is happening here? And is this it?
Well, it's this story of a friend of mine at the CPA firm. He'd come in every day, open his bag, and go, cheese sandwich. And he'd go, hmm. And finally, after about 2 weeks of this, I said, John, why don't you ask your wife to make you something different? He said, you leave my wife out of this. I make these sandwiches. And that's so much of life. We make these choices. We make these choices to see the glass half empty. And, you know, I use the metaphor of a game show in my class, and I do it the very first week. I say, here's your first exam. The first door is fear, anger, and anxiety. The second door is love, joy, and peace. Which door do you prefer? And by the way, if you prefer door number one, please don't raise your hand. Just see me after class because we need to talk. But we have,
Right.
the neuroscience suggests we have this thing called the amygdala, which is our fear organ in the brain, which is really important biologically. We wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't have that amygdala, which again awakes us to threats and situations. But the amygdala, this is a fascinating part of it, which we're just discovering, is also the source of altruism and compassion. And the amygdala can be grown. And this is what meditation does. So there's a wonderful lady back at Georgetown, Abigail Marsh, who was rescued from a near-death experience by a stranger. She never found out who it was, but she studied for the rest of her life. She studied, why would somebody do that? And she studied kidney transplant donors. And what she discovered, Broderick, is that they have larger amygdalas. So the amygdala is
Mhm.
not only the source of tragedy and fear and anger and anxiety, it's also the source of love, joy, and peace. So I tell my students every day you need to dose. And they look at me and
Yeah.
what do you mean? I say you need to you need to ingest in some fashion through meditation in some way dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Dose. And when you do, you're on an ascent. You're on an upward spiral, which will give you a quality or a perspective and resilience, which will allow you to endure the tragedies, the deaths, um, the situation that we find ourselves in, which is horrific. Carl Jung suggested we're in an apocalyptic moment, and I believe it's true. When you see so many kids and families being killed in Gaza. This is apocalypse. In the old days, soldiers fought soldiers, right? Now, we don't care about civilians. We call it collateral. But I use a
Mhm.
French term. That's bullshit. It is.
Yeah,
It is. They don't need it.
yeah,
Unnecessary. As Thich Nhat Hanh said, it's totally unnecessary.
yeah. It's so many tragic things happening all over the globe, and we can name practically every continent. Sudan. I mean, all over Africa. And parts of Asia and South America, and craziness bubbling up here in our country here in the United States. And I think we have this tendency as human beings, and like you said about fear, the importance of having a capacity to deal with fear is an important part of our historical survival. And we have this negativity bias. We tend to focus on the negative because, in order to survive, you need to, especially for our ancestors, we're pretty small creatures, especially alone by ourselves and without a lot of mechanical technology. We're not that threatening, particularly by ourselves in the natural environment. And so
Mhm.
we need to be able to attend to those possibilities of tragedy. But we don't have to, particularly in our modern era. Most of us, particularly in our modern wealthy nations, we don't really have to. I can say that for so-called poor nations as well. Do we really have to attend to this as a global community? We do not. And I think that that's a part of what that cultural evolution that we need to be trying to uh, inspire in ourselves and in others. That's the way I look at when you say you need a dose, to your students and these various traditions. Attend to positive qualities. You need to give yourself that, because if you don't, you have a tendency to stray off into madness. We all have that tendency to stray off into madness. And if we are not intentional about, I call them putting selection pressures on ourselves,
Mhm.
putting a selection pressure of goodness, beauty, compassion, love, all of these various positive qualities. And as we do that, we create those conditions. We put through discipline, we put these boundaries on ourselves, and we allow those boundaries to help us uh, transform into what those qualities are molding us to be. And we can do that because we have this reasoning capacity to organize a story, a narrative, and create those favorable conditions that are conducive to us evolving in a different way,
Mhm.
evolving away from the potential for madness and towards goodness and beauty. Does that
Roderick,
resonate at all with you, or am I just babbling?
I should be interviewing you because you get it. You get it, my
No.
friend. I've been involved for the last 3 or 4 years in a project called the Ubuntu Project, and so we have a documentary called "The Spirit of Ubuntu" that I did with Pato Bantan, who is a reggae singer, and we went to 10 nations. And in 1999, I was in Cape Town, South Africa, and I heard this term for the first time, first from Nelson Mandela, who spoke about it, and then from a professor at Cape Town University. And I said, this is it. This word is it, because it recognizes two things. One, it says, I am because we are, which suggests our interconnectedness, that there's absolute equality on the playing field. Nobody is better than anybody else, but we're a team and we all have different personalities. And so we need to recognize that. And in African culture, they always did that in circle, right? Nobody was better than anybody else, including the chief. Everybody was in circle. And then the second part of Ubuntu, I am because we are, the first part, interdependence and interconnectedness. And the second part is we are because I am, which suggests that each of us has infinite value, Each of us here is to manifest that infinite value. So, working in child welfare as I do, when I see the loss of a child last week, a 13-year-old child of one of our patients at Volunteers in Medicine took her life, I go,
Mm.
because that expression, that gift is not available to us anymore. And there's just too much of that going on. So we are because I am, and recognizing that infinite value and recognizing that our systems of dominance no longer work. So I do a lot of work. We have a thing called Compassionate Las Vegas, compassionatelv.org. And it's part of the Charter for Compassion, which is over 600 communities around the globe, which are connecting through circle process and which are creating a quality of conversation and communication at the level of the soul, which allows for the soul to show up. And the soul is shy. And when the soul shows up, then synchronicity, serendipity, and synergy begin to happen. And we begin to get wisdom, we begin to get answers, and we begin to get a quality of courage to face the difficulties that we have. But this word Ubuntu is really important to me, and we're now showcasing it around the planet. We're going to South Africa next month to the Ubuntu Festival, and humanity emerged out of Africa. And so this has been my conviction.
Mm-hmm.
So the answers to humanity's issues will come out of Africa as well. And Africa, there's a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful proverb that says, the truth that was lost in the morning shall return in the evening. And I believe we're in evening time. We're in a very difficult moment. It's getting darker and darker. And I believe this one word, Ubuntu, carries with it the hope of a possible future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's it's so many traditions and cultural perspectives that are pointing us in a direction
Yeah,
towards the good, towards being well. And
yeah, and
you've
compassion.
quoted quite a few people from all over, everywhere. It's just
Yeah, and
beautiful what you're doing.
compassion is really game theory, Broderick. So in game theory, there's only four
Mm,
possible outcomes: lose, 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 win, win, lose, and win, win. And
mm-hmm.
compassion is suggests that nobody wins unless everybody wins. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is in the field of healthcare, there's been a book called Compassionomics. In the field of business, I'm involved with a business where everybody, the employees, the vendors, the customers, everybody's a winner. And I mean winner. And as a result, the tide rises and there's
Yeah.
an influx of spirit that emerges and a quality of well-being emerges. So in every sector you can imagine, I'm introducing this to our local LGBTQ center, which one sometimes thinks that there's community in that community, but there's not. There's a lot of
No.
tension in that community. And
Mm-hmm.
I have a daughter who's trans, and I have gone through the transition with her at the age of 26, 27. And I have seen the cruelty of human beings toward other human beings. And I have
Mm-hmm.
seen even within the own community. So we just started a circle of trust, which is an opportunity to show us, everybody, another way of showing up. And in a circle of trust, it's a win-win formula.
Yeah. Was that positive sum game?
Yeah,
Doesn't have
yeah.
to be zero sum, folks,
Well,
or
zero sum
negative
doesn't
sum.
work. Zero sum doesn't
It
work
does not
because the
work.
rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and all hell is breaking loose right now. If you look at the number of dictators on the planet as opposed to
Yeah.
10 years ago,
Yeah.
it's a bad trend, and it's getting worse. And why is that? Because fear is dominating the culture. And so can we take a moment and ask the
Mm-hmm.
question, why is that the case? And how do we, in a revolutionary way,
Yes.
turn the tide? And revolutionary love, revolutionary compassion, revolutionary hope.
Exactly. We don't need violence.
No,
We don't need
it's
it.
very, very
And you're
ineffective.
saying that. It's very ineffective. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think our the human the human history has definitely had a long history of violence. But I think we're sitting here today because There had to have been some type of win-win happening with our ancestors, and that win-win was like, you know what? We need to team together. We have to cooperate. We have to put aside our differences, or at least willing to explore those differences, but we have to find the common good in order for us to survive as a community. And we call those folks tribes, what, thousands and thousands of years ago. But they survived because of these, yeah, they may not have been articulating these ideas the way that we are right now, but they survive because they decided to cooperate.
Yeah.
They decided to connect.
So one of the things we're doing in Las Vegas is restorative justice. And in traditional communities, right, Aboriginal communities, they didn't have prisons. So what did they do with the ne'er-do-well? Well, in Africa, what they've documented is they would put the person in the center of a circle, they would surround the person, and each person would go around saying, well, let me tell you why I'm grateful for Broderick. And then the next person, well, let me tell you what Broderick did for me the other day. And they would go around, and by the end, when they got around the circle, done. No prison. But I live in Nevada. We have a private prison system, capitalized. What's their incentive? Increase the prison population. So mass incarceration is a condemning fact in our society. It condemns us because it suggests to us that we have a win-lose proposition. And the zero-sum game comes out to
Mm-hmm.
zero. No addition, no value added. And in fact, in my opinion, it's a negative. And the restorative justice cases we're doing, Broderick, it would blow your mind. It's so exciting to see what can happen when you go into circle and you create diversion
Mm-hmm.
opportunities where a 14-year-old who would be tried as an adult go to prison, either join a gang or die on the outside in a gang. 14-year-old, one of our cases, he said, I'm 14 years old. I never wanted to be part of that gang. I just want to follow the trade of my grandfather. I want another school. Please help me. And we did, and he's got a life.
Mm-hmm.
If we had had him expelled from school, he'd be either dead or be on the streets with guns, right? This is not a life. This, and shame on us, shame on those who have privilege, who don't see this, who think that penalty and punitive measures, even more so now, are the right correct action. It's just it's insane. We are insane. I laugh, but I cry at the same time.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah. We're insane, but yet we're beautiful at the same time. And I
exactly.
think we have to see the beauty in us and see the beauty in others. I get it. There are people doing horrible things in the world. I get it.
But their inner core, right? Their essence is absolutely, infinitely, eternally beautiful. And what we have to do is
Mm-hmm.
help them take the glaucoma or the whatever is filtering their self perception away, help them to understand the importance of self compassion, help them to begin to heal and transform. And then we get a gift from every one of those persons. So I have a
Mm-hmm.
friend up in Seattle, in Tacoma area. He came over as a Cambodian refugee. His name is Olaf. And he was 3 years old when he came over. And the Bloods and the Crips moved into his neighborhood and said, you got one of two choices. You either join us or you die. So he joined, and he was involved in a drive-by. And he's out now. And you know why he's out? Because enough evidence was provided to the Supreme Court of the state of Washington to show that a brain is not fully formed until age 25, 26. And that when he was 17, there was in fact diminished capacity. And in fact, if you look at the story, the narrative of his life, another reason why we should not punish this person, but see if we can create an opportunity for restoration. Restoration.
Mm-hmm.
So, what a world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I guess, what can I ask you this question? What role does you're an educator? What role does education play in all of this?
Oh, it's the most important. So the word education comes from the Latin educare, which means to lead out of. Lead out of what? Lead out of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a lot of ignorance right now. So education is really important because what we need to do, I was a CPA for 25 years and I was really very left brained, right? I was tilting. So I went back to school and got a little adjustment. And now I'm teaching philosophy. So I got the right brain kicking in. We need to have an educational system that allows both sides of the brain to develop, the creative side and the analytical side, the synthetic side, to 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 be fostered at the same time. And what we did with No Child Left Behind, thank you, Mr. Bush, is we left children behind. We've left generations behind. We've taken play out of the curriculum. We've taken the arts. We've taken literature. We've taken social studies. We've taken, you know, Black History Month. We're in Black History Month now. It's being taken out of the curriculum. And it's like, how stupid can we be? And so
Mm-hmm.
again, we have to have an educational system which Steiner and Waldorf and many others understood, where we're really training both sides of the brain and we're helping that person really to elevate with both wings, not just one wing.
Mm-hmm.
Education. So I'll tell you a story. We have a charter school. We're doing a program through Compassion Las Vegas where we're introducing circles of trust into the schools. So every Wednesday, if any of you are ever in Las Vegas, let me know. I'd love to take you. Wednesday from 11 to 12, every grade, kindergarten through 8, does a circle of trust. And these kids go around and they say, "Hey, Broderick, what's on your heart today?" And they go around the circle and everybody shares, "What's on my heart?" And then another question, "Hey, Broderick, what are you grateful for today?" Hmm. And in one of the circles I was in, it was beautiful. Little Louise said, when asked, "What's on your heart?" "Well, Miguel called me a bad name yesterday on the playground." And the teacher, who was facilitator, said, "What would it take for this to be healed?" And he put his hand up. Little Miguel came over, high fived him, it was done. They had an opportunity in that 1 hour every Wednesday to do something they can't even do at home. They can't do with
Yeah.
their friends, which is to show up as their true selves. And the last exercise they do, Broderick, is really great. It's shine a light on Broderick. So everybody goes around the circle and they shine a light on Broderick and they say what I said earlier. They say, "How cool is Broderick? Let me tell you what he did for my family last week. He brought some groceries home for us, right? How cool is Broderick? He played with me. We shot some baskets and he showed me a few moves, right?" That's education.
Yep.
That's allowing the soul to emerge. And if the soul never emerges, then well being, you can have great physical health, you can live to your 99 years old, but I would suggest to you, you don't have well being.
Yeah. Amen to that. I agree. I think, education is the means by which we learn the skill sets. We learn the narrative, the story. And if we're taking civics out of school, if we're not even talking about ethics and
Mm-mm.
values and virtues. I just don't get it. I really don't get how we don't talk about that in our schools. And that's great that you're giving these young people the opportunity to experiment with these ideas because they're learning that they can do that. They're learning that it's possible to resolve conflict. It's possible to try to have a conversation with someone who you've had a difference with. It's possible to try to gain clarity about why someone did something. Even if a young person can't fully understand what could be going on in the bully's home that's causing that person to be a bully, they can still learn to have compassion for that bully. And maybe they over time they learn to have a deeper understanding of why we behave and act out the way we do. Now, I think restraint is important. We got to have restraint,
Yeah.
but how do we have restraint for the sake of, like you said, restoration, but for the sake of evolution, for education? I guess you can say evolution or development of character. And I think that's what education's supposed to be about, is creating the conditions and giving students, I consider myself a student today, I die, giving human beings the opportunity to continue to grow and learn how to live well, and to ask that question, what it means to live well, and open ourselves up to those possibilities that you've mentioned throughout this podcast. I mean, I can't list all of the various positive qualities that you've named, um, throughout, but in order for that to happen, it requires some exposure. And if we're not exposing ourselves as adults, if we're not exposing children, how would they know? How are you to know how to be compassionate if no one has ever really taught you what that really means and what that looks like? You
Yeah,
know,
it's so
I think,
true.
yeah, that's education, folks. Like you said, it's just that's the real education.
Yeah. Well, there was a great rabbi
Mhm.
who lived a long time ago during the time of Jesus in Alexandria in Egypt. His name was Philo, and he's actually regarded as one of the founders of Christianity, even though he was a rabbi in Judaism. But he said if you really understood what's in the bag of Broderick, what's in the bag of Gard, what we're carrying, the heavy load that we're carrying, the only possible response you could have to any person, mom, dad, siblings, friends, is compassion.
Yep,
Is compassion.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we do that, Guard? How do we get to learn what's in the bag? How do I learn about what's in the bag of Broderick? What can I do?
Well, I think a big piece of it is to start with self compassion and to know that you're worth taking care of yourself. We have a lot of shame and blame and guilt and so on and so forth. And we shut down, we get depressed. And a friend of mine, Lisa Miller, has written a book called The Awakened Brain. And she's done the study. She's at Columbia University. And there's control studies, and all of her colleagues said, this is baloney. This is not academic. But she said the flip side of depression is spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we cultivate that spiritual dimension of our life, which in our material culture we've really downplayed, and anything inside of us we really don't give attention to other than throwing pills in our mouth, which doesn't give attention to it. So, we have to learn that there's a vertical dimension to life and there's a horizontal. The vertical is creating a quality of connection with something larger than ourselves. And again, you can be an atheist or an agnostic or a theist. I don't care what you
Mm-hmm.
are, as long as you're creating that connection. So Sam Harris, who's one of the big atheists on our planet, right? He's a neuroscientist and he knows meditation works. And so he meditates every day, even though he says, there's nothing out there. Well, Sam, you're welcome to that opinion, but I don't know where that thing is coming that making your life better, but I call it God, right? And then the horizontal is our moral engagement. So we have to be morally engaged as well. We can't just sit around and meditate. We have to actually
Mm-hmm.
go out and do something. And that's where the compassionate network of communities around the planet, where we identify issue areas. So we've identified the environment, mental health, education, social justice, and I always forget the last one, but it'll come to me. Um, that there are issues in all of our communities that are particular to our communities. So, what are we going to do about it? And it may be as simple as smiling, just
Yeah.
smiling at that person behind the counter at 7-Eleven, smiling at that homeless person. You may not have money to give them, but you can give them a smile and you can change their day. You can change their life. There was a story, famous singer, Lady Gaga. She has a foundation, Kindness Foundation. It's a great story. There was a fellow who was on his way to the Golden Gate Bridge, lived in the Bay Area, And in the Bay Area, the best place to commit suicide is the Golden Gate Bridge, right? So he was on his way to the Golden Gate Bridge, and he said to himself, if I just get one person to smile at me, I won't do this. And he was on a bus. He was in plenty of opportunities where people could smile. Nobody smiled. When he finally got to his destination on the Golden Gate Bridge and was about to jump, some lady came over and she was smiling, but she was saying, could you take my picture? Right? Because she was smiling for her picture, right? This wasn't smiling at you, Broderick. This is smiling at myself. Narcissism. So anyway, after that picture, he said, I'm done. And he jumped, but he survived. And he told the
Mm.
story, and Lady Gaga picked it up. And so we should never underestimate what we could do for another person. So that horizontal dimension, along with the vertical, when we create a quality of moral engagement in our life, when we go out into the world and we're a little more patient and a little kinder with folks, we create an opportunity for healing and transformation for ourselves. This is self-compassion.
Mm.
This is how we do it. We get out of ourselves. Hafiz, the great Persian poet, said, Hafiz, there's something between you and God. Hafiz, get out of the way. It's our
Yep.
ego. Yeah.
Yeah. This has been great, Gar. We're coming to a close here, and there's just so many things I literally can just talk with you all day about these things. It's just you open up so many can of worms, and I have so many questions. I try to summarize some of this stuff, or I kind of throw my take on it as I try to say or comment on the things that you're saying. I think a lot of what you've been saying is, especially with your emphasis on compassion, is take cognitive empathy in a person's life. We don't know what a person has gone through. Being, empathetic to our own cognition, our own narrative and story requires some type of mindfulness, some type of a self-reflective awareness, and then as we do that, there's this whole bag inside of us, these narratives and stories that we have no idea. That's kind of, I think it's the gift of people talk bad about Freud. He wasn't perfect, but this idea of the subconscious and the unconscious, the way he called it, and how Carl Jung really took that and really developed that, and that we have all this stuff that we're not aware of. And that is driving a lot of our actions. And some of the people who are doing some not so great things in the world, we don't know what kind of tragedy they've experienced. And that doesn't mean that we don't exercise restraint. I know that needs to happen. But can we exercise restraint in a compassionate way, like you're saying? And that requires a very strong moral, ethical education, and emphasis on that, because then that restraint is done in a restorative way, where we can inspire and encourage the better angels of our nature, and we
Mm-hmm.
can do that for folks. And compassion sounds like the way you're talking about it. Compassion is a way to do that. And maybe, hopefully, we can draw out the good. And you've given some examples of how that has happened in the work you're doing with, especially with young people, adults too, of course, but getting a young person started thinking about this stuff, whew, that's big. That's a
Yeah.
to me, that's some major social justice work. If that's some major justice work, because they're not getting it in the schools necessarily, because the school is designed to raise GDP, not necessarily designed to develop character, higher moral character. As the Greeks would say, eudaimonia. There's no our educational system is not encouraging us to do that, and I think that
No.
that's what you're doing in the various foundations that you're working with, teaching philosophy in school. And apparently, it seems like you're talking about moral, religious, ethical philosophy, and those are the things that we need, Gar. We need you. We need your voice. We
Well,
need your
we're
wisdom.
not just talking about it. Every class I teach, we always take a few minutes of meditation at the beginning. I teach
Awesome.
them how to meditate. I teach them about yoga. I teach them practical ways in which they can do that transformation, loving kindness meditation. This is what we need to share with one another because there is another door. And it would be sad to live a life and not know that that other door is your birthright. And it is your birthright.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I know we could close on that, but I do want to ask you this last question. And is there anything you can think of that you would like to leave the audience with? It could be a question. It could be anything that you want to share with this audience, and to reflect on. Because the idea is to not only listen to this podcast, but to take uh, what we have done in our conversation and see if it can inspire in them something to reflect on. So
Einstein, who
anything.
was a pretty smart guy, he said there are three principles that govern the universe, not just our solar system, but everything, all of reality. And that is that there's an underlying unity to all of creation, that if you go back 13.8 billion years, you go back to a moment of singularity. So from aardvarks to zebras, everything is connected. And we know that from the DNA. We know that from our personal experience. So unity is the first principle. The second principle is diversity. Out of that unity comes an amazing array of flowers, which gives rise to gardens, an amazing array of personality types, which gives rise to humanity, amazing array of species, right? So diversity is inherent in everything. And as I tell my students, anything that works against diversity works against the universe. And whether the jar hits the rock or the rock hits the jar, it's bad for the jar. So don't work against diversity. And we see so many people who are implementing laws, who are implementing attitudes that go against diversity. And the third principle is growth, that everything is growing and evolving and developing. We're moving from tragedy to comedy. And there are three values associated with those three principles. So, unity, it's love. When we experience love, we experience our oneness. Oneness not only with ourselves, but with all of creation, not just humans, but all creation. And the second value is compassion. When we are compassionate, we see that diversity and we celebrate the diversity. We go, wow, cool, it's February, Black History Month. I want to learn about Maya Angelou. I want to read some of her poetry. Langston Hughes, I love you, right? Diversity. And then the third principle is growth. And the value there is hope, that there's always hope. Hope never ends. It always goes. And I tell my students, there's associated with those three values and those three principles, the Bill of Rights. There's really only one Bill of Rights. It's the Universal Bill of Rights. Everybody has a right to be. Everybody has a right to belong. Everybody has a right to become exactly who they were intended to become. And what we can do as human beings is to foster that Bill of Rights amongst ourselves as community. And I would add, for the non-human community as well. Because as one philosopher
Absolutely.
said, for non-human species, the devil is humanity, is human beings, and hell is living with humanity. We're in the
Mm-hmm.
largest extinction period in the history of the planet, and it's bad. So those three principles, those three values, those three rights, which carry with them responsibilities. So to attend to our own well-being, to attend to the well-being of others, and to attend to our own growth, our own development, right? How do we do that? Through the mind, the heart, the soul, and the body, right? Jesus said it, with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. In India, it's the four yogas. So when we do that, welcome home.
Amen, my brother. I just love what you're doing and what you just said. It's just absolutely beautiful. And audience, I hope there's a lot there for you to reflect on. I know I'm going to be reflecting on it for some time. Thank you, Gard. This has been lovely. I hope to continue to be in dialogue and conversation with you. And let's talk again soon.
God bless you. God bless you out there in the listening audience. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.